Two young police officers are among 6 people killed in an execution-style ambush and siege at a rural Queensland property. Joining us live is Terry Goldsworthy, Assistant Professor in Criminology and Bond University, and also a former Detective Inspector with the Queensland Police Force. Terry, we really appreciate you joining us on what is no doubt a very difficult day for the law enforcement community there in Queensland. This incident obviously very confronting for anyone who's served or has people close to them on the front line. What is your read on what went on here?
Look, it is very confronting, and it's a tragedy in all respects. It's highly unusual. I mean, the number of circumstances that we know at the moment, and there's more information coming to light regularly. We've got multiple shooters, we've got multiple victims, some police, some not police. The circumstances of the police being asked to attend the address is unclear at this stage. I mean, we were told it was a missing person, but the missing person to reports appears to be one of the shooters involved, which is just perplexing. So the callous act of some of the actions taken by the shooters after the initial engagement, again, is highly unusual. And this is really, an event that no one saw coming and will take a long time to digest.
So, Terry, how strange is it to have 3 people together involved in this sort of attack? It sounds like something you might hear reports of a lone attacker doing. We have seen some similar instances overseas like that, but to have a group of people involved, it sounds bizarre.
Yeah, it is. The data tells us primarily males are the type of offender you have in this instance. In this instance, reports that there was a female and 2 males, so that's unusual in itself. The fact that they engaged in police who arrived there, the specialist units who arrived there, they engaged in a firefight, so to say, with them. An active shooter type scenario is also unusual. So the circumstances as to whether they had any intention of ever trying to surrender or whether this was some kind of action where they'd formed the intention to end up with fatalities to themselves as such is interesting. But I mean, it's a horrendous event that's occurred, and we have seen some previous incidents like this over the years, not often. We had the Walsh Street killings where 2 police were lured there and executed. We had 2 police killed at Crescents Hill in New South Wales, where a fellow lay in wait with a camouflage and a sniper rifle, high-powered rifle, and killed both of those officers. And we had Brett Ford up here in Queensland recently in 2017, killed by a gunman who waited in ambush around a corner on a dirt road out west in Queensland. So they are unusual. They have occurred over the years, but when they do occur, they certainly send a shockwave through the law enforcement community.
The report suggesting the gunman continued to shoot the officers after they died are particularly distressing. It sounds like the 2 officers who have survived the attack acted with incredible bravery and professionalism in the face of such an awful scene.
It would have been really confronting. It appears the officers are all fairly junior, but they would have had a certain level of training, as all police do, and that training has kicked in and probably saved their lives. I mean, one of them is wounded. The other one, my understanding was the offenders actively looked for her, so that in itself would have been extremely confronting, knowing what they'd done to their partners just shortly prior to that. So the actions that they've taken after the initial shooting are just incomprehensible, really, and I think they give a good indicator as to the mindset of these people before the police even set foot on the property.
And in terms of procedure here, it appears that 4 officers initially went to that property as the result of the missing person inquiry. What is the rule here in terms of how many officers attend a scene like that? Is that unusual or pretty standard to have 4 on the scene?
Look, it does raise a flag for me. I mean, if you're going to look for a missing person, usually it's a two-officer job. The fact that 4 were sent would indicate that maybe they had some intelligence as to perhaps the occupant or a occupant of the premises. Now, that'll all come out in the coroner's hearing. There has to be an inquest of this because they are reportable deaths as they took place in a police operation. And the coroner will be looking at the events that led up to the police being sent there, what information do they have, what intelligence, how are they briefed on approaching the premises, etc. And part of the operational actions of police in any incident they attend is to conduct a risk assessment, prepare a plan of approach, all of those things will be examined, and the response to the QPS after the initial shootings will also be part of that examination. And if there's any failings identified, and I don't want to preempt that there would be any, but any adjustments to policy or procedures that may avoid incidents like this in the future will come out in the form of recommendations from the coroner.
Does the fact that the offenders were wearing military-style outfits, had access to these sorts of guns, does that give you any insight into what might have been going on there at that property?
Well, it indicates to me a level of preparedness. I mean, generally, most normal people don't sit around a lounge room with high-powered rifles and camouflage gear on, whiling away the time. So, without being flippant, that would seem to me to indicate that these people were perhaps expecting the police to come. And I think that goes back to my initial comments about the information that came from New South Wales Police and how that fits into this puzzle, because it is quite puzzling that they would be so aggressive if the police just turned up there without any kind of announcement looking for a missing person. I mean, it's different, I guess, if you're a wanted person and you're in a hideout and the police are looking for you to take you into custody. Well, these police, for our information we have, weren't there for that reason. They were there for a missing person. The fact that they killed a civilian as well, it also throws another curveball into the whole situation. That why did they see the necessity of killing the police officer? They didn't seem to attempt to escape. They remained on the property. I'm not sure how quickly reinforcements for the police arrived there, but there was no visible attempt to escape the cordon closing on them, which again I think gives an indication as to their mindset.
Terry, you mentioned some attacks in Australia that have had some parallels. When it comes to attacks on our police officers, how does Australia compare with other countries in terms of the violence that our law enforcement officers face on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, look, if you compare us to, say, the UK have a less amount of police deaths than we do in Australia. But if you look at the US, they have by far more. I think in a 4-year period, we had one police officer die through an attack. Over there, they had something like 224 officers die or be killed from attacks, primarily involving handguns. Handguns, or firearms, I should say, feature in about 80% of, depending on the time period you're looking at, 80% of police fatalities through attacks. So it is problematic. But certainly compared to the US, we're far better off, and you can attribute that to our tighter gun laws, the fact we don't have that high level of gun ownership. Our violent crimes involve firearms to a lesser extent, as the data tells us. So we're in a reasonably good place, I think, in terms of police fatalities. Obviously, we don't want any police being killed, but that's probably utopian thought. What we've got is a system that limits that kind of exposure to them. I mean, it's a dangerous job. I mean, in addition to the fatal attacks on police, we have thousands of non-fatal serious assaults on police each year. So it is a difficult job. It's quite dangerous, and I think the public need to acknowledge that at times.
Yeah, and our thoughts with those two young officers, their loved ones and colleagues today. It really is such a horrible event. Terry, really appreciate you sharing your insights with us. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ash.